Playwright Anton Chekhov famously said, "Never place a loaded rifle on stage if it isn't going to go off." In other words, every detail must be relevant, and every setup should have a payoff. Thus, the narrative principle of Chekhov's gun was born. But it isn't always a gun. Chekhov's Whatever is a podcast where myself and guests watch a movie and try to predict what role Chekhov's gun will play. Welcome to Chekhov's Whatever. Hello and welcome to Chekhov's Whatever, the podcast that makes a game of movies and storytelling. I'm your host, Meg Mazeski. Here with me today to discuss the 2024 horror film Smile 2 is Jen Owens. Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Hi. Happy to be here.
So I know Jen from back in the halcyon heyday of Lady Pod Squad, which was an online community of women podcasters. It was amazing. And she had a podcast called One Person's Trash is Our Treasure, aka Optia. I absolutely loved the podcast. Also, Jen and her co-host Rachel were the only guests we ever had on our Endorse Women podcast. So you hold that special title.
Oh my God. I'm so honored. I for sure thought there was at least one other guest. Oh my God. I love that.
So we have this great little reunion.
Yeah.
Jen, anything else you'd like to tell the listener about yourself?
Well, that podcast is now defunct. But, you know, it exists. And it was with my co-host, Rachel. And we had a blast. And who knows, maybe one day we'll do something else, but not right now.
I look forward to your future potential podcast.
Yeah, right now it's just guesting here.
Awesome. Yes, I roped in Jen today to talk about the 2024 horror movie Smile 2, which, as you may have guessed, is a sequel to the movie Smile, which came out in 2022. In Smile 2, about to embark on a new world tour, global pop sensation Sky Riley begins to experience increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and pressures of fame, Sky is forced to face her dark past to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. This movie stars Naomi Scott, Rosemarie DeWitt, Lucas Gage, Dylan Jalula, and Miles Gutierrez Riley. It was also written and directed by Parker Finn, who was the writer and director for the first Smile movie as well. Smile 2 has an 86% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and an 81% audience score, which is about 5% higher than Smile's scores on Rotten Tomatoes. So I find that interesting. So Jen, what expectations did you have for this movie? Please tell me you watched the first Smile, otherwise I feel really bad about making you watch a random sequel.
Wouldn't that be so funny? Well, what's funny is I thought I had seen the first Smile.
Uh-oh.
No, I did watch it. But when you proposed Smile 2, I was like, oh, great. But then I was talking to Rachel, my previous co-host, about it. And she was like, no, I saw that in the theater with someone else. And I was like, what am I thinking of? I was thinking of that movie Truth or Dare, which had a similar moment with like a creepy smile thing.
Yes.
But so I did watch both films. Rachel and I had a double feature back to back. Yeah, the first one I enjoyed. I thought it did a lot of really interesting things. Specifically, I was obsessed with the color symbolism in the first movie.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
I was probably the most annoying I've ever been watching a movie because every time a new scene would start and a new character would walk in, I'd go, she's wearing pink. And it became like a, joke.
So refresh my memory because I haven't seen Smile since it came out. So was pink the main color theory going on there?
Well, there were like several. There was pink, blue, green, yellow, and brown are the ones that we think have like meanings.
Oh, interesting.
Pink and blue seemed to be like the most prevalent and showed up the most. Like the psych hospital, the walls were always either pink or blue. The main character was like, her first couple of outfits were always blue. She had this blue coat. And blue, we think, is like trauma. Or like unresolved trauma, the inability to move on from trauma.
Interesting.
Pink, which the main character's sister is pretty much always wearing, and shows up in the hospital a lot. So again, some of the walls are pink. A lot of the light coming in from windows is pink. We think pink is like healed trauma or the ability to move
Oh,
on from that trauma. So obviously throughout the plot of the first film, the protagonist, we find out that she has childhood trauma that she has been
hmm,
unable to move on from, but like her sister has. So her sister dresses in pink a lot, or like her
interesting.
therapist also has like a pink coat. And then yellow is like a representation of the curse or like succumbing to the curse or like an
Mm.
episode. Like in the very beginning of the movie when the patient kind of like freaks out, there are bright yellow flowers on the table that she knocks over. Or the gift for the nephew, she wraps it in bright yellow wrapping paper.
As you're saying this, I can already think of some instances where this color theory, I think, probably carries over into Smile too. Would you agree with that? I'm thinking of a yellow T-shirt in specific.
Yes, there's some of it. I will say, I don't know if we want to go into this yet, but I was disappointed that I felt the color symbolism wasn't as strong. Like when we finished the first movie, by the end of it, we had figured out what all the colors meant. We thought that green was like a sense of normalcy, and brown was either a call for help or an offer for help.
Okay.
So when we scrubbed back through the first movie to see if, like re-solidify if we were right and see if we like missed anything, it was so reinforced in like every frame, every costume, every like piece of lighting or set deck. And we noticed stuff that we hadn't before, like the nephew. The first time we see the nephew, he's wearing green. Later, after he's been traumatized, the second time we see him, he's wearing blue. So
How
that like
interesting.
reinforced that we were right, and it was just like very strong, very consistent throughout the whole first film. And I wanted that more in the second one, and I didn't super feel like we got it, but there was a little echoes of it there.
Very interesting. Yeah, you'll definitely have to point those out as we go through the movie
Yeah,
here.
sure.
And I also feel like maybe just everyone is wicked pilled. We just see pink and green everywhere.
That's very fair. Yeah.
No, but I believe you. You have a very in depth interpretation there. And also, if anyone wants to hear more about color theory, listen to my episode about Hot Frosty.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen Hot Frosty yet, so I haven't listened to that episode yet. I'm very excited.
Yes, my guest on that episode also had a lot to say about color theory. So, yeah, this is why I bring so many guests on, because they point out things that I wouldn't even think of. So, I love it. But yeah, I was excited to watch Smile too because I had seen Smile previously, the first movie, and it's my favorite genre of horror movie, which is death, curse, MLM, like The Ring or It Follows.
MLM.
It's the only way to get rid of the curse is that you have to recruit other people in, work from
Yeah.
home. It's
Yeah.
great.
It's from the top down, it'll
Yeah,
get to you.
The first Smile movie was very reminiscent of The Ring to me, which is my all-time favorite horror movie. You have this female lead who is determined to solve a mystery, and with a ticking clock, she only has a limited amount of time in which to figure out what is going on and hopefully stop the curse as well. So it ticked a lot of those same boxes for me. I watched the Smile 2 teaser trailer, and that was enough for me. I'm like, I'm on board. This looks really good. Let's watch it. So before we get into scene by scene of Smile 2, here's a quick refresher of how Chekhov's Whatever works. This is a podcast where myself and the lovely guest watch and review a movie that's new to us. We also play a game where we try to guess what Chekhov's gun will be and how it will play out later in the movie. Chekhov's gun is a plot element that must have a setup and a payoff. That setup usually happens in Act 1, and the payoff typically comes later in Act 3. A Chekhov's gun is also typically a concrete item, action, or person rather than something symbolic or thematic. And finally, a Chekhov's gun should move the plot forward in a meaningful way. We get +2 points for correctly identifying a Chekhov's gun. Remember, there may be more than one or none. We also get an additional point for correctly guessing how that Chekhov's gun will pay off. And finally, we lose 1 point if we incorrectly identify a Chekhov's gun and its role. And then whoever has the most points at the end wins. So the very first scene of this movie might be a little bit difficult to understand if you haven't seen Smile, the first movie. But it also kind of acts as an oblique explainer for how the curse works to new viewers, but also kind of not. Anyway, I'll get into it in a moment. But the movie starts with the title card that says 6 days later. So this is 6 days after the end of the first film. We see a guy sitting in his car staking out a house. This guy is Joel. He is the ex-boyfriend of the protagonist of Smile, Rose, and spoilers for Smile as well. He witnessed Rose self-immolate, so the curse was then passed on to him. While he's waiting outside this home, someone pulls up in a car, and Joel runs over to him at gunpoint and forces him to go inside the house. Inside the house is a drug kingpin, and this guy that Joel is holding at gunpoint is his lackey/brother. Joel forces the drug kingpin to watch as he stabs this guy's brother to death. The drug kingpin pulls a gun and shoots at Joel. Joel shoots back, killing him. And at this point, Joel is very desperate. And he's saying things like, no, you need to live in order to pass on the curse. I need someone to have witnessed this and survive, to be the person to accept the curse. And so he's freaking out. And then another man busts into the room, Lucas Gage. We will see more of him later. Joel is like, I didn't mean for this to happen to you. Lewis is very confused. What are you talking about? Joel flees the scene only to be confronted by more drug dealers. And then as he's running away, he is run over in a very gruesome, horrifying manner by a truck.
That was a lot.
Yeah. And I saw that and I remembered that scene from the trailer. And I was like, I feel like there was a very sanitized, either I'm going crazy or they depicted the scene very differently in the trailer. Because in the movie, you see his disembodied foot on the ground. There's like this smear of gore and viscera. You see his crumpled body on under the car. It's very gruesome.
Yeah.
And I did go back and look at the trailer, and no, it's just like Photoshop paintbrushed. It's just like a red smear on the pavement. I'm like, oh, it makes sense that they would censor the trailer because that was intense.
Yeah, it's gory in a way that almost feels unrealistic, which, a horror movie.
It is a horror movie, yeah.
But I do remember being like, is that what happens? Surely not.
Yeah, that car would have had to been going, I don't know, like 90 miles an hour or something for that sort of thing to happen, I would assume. But what do I know?
that whole first sequence, did you notice while you were watching it that it's all one shot?
Oh, no, I didn't notice. That's interesting.
Yeah, we didn't either, which is like great. We both feel like we usually notice that kind of thing. We didn't notice at all.
I feel like I would have noticed that too.
Yeah, and we double checked, and yeah, it is. I think they do like one of those cheats where like there's a quick pan and there's probably an edit in it.
Oh, there's like probably a post-production edit type of thing, but they splice it together. Yeah, this is a good opening scene, I think, in that sense that already we've got interesting imagery. Of course, the smear of blood across the pavement looks like a smile. Mm-hmm. And in case that wasn't obvious enough, bam, you're hit with the bright red title card, Smile 2.
I liked the scene a lot, but I think it might just because I really like that actor, that Kyle Galler, the guy that played Joel. Yeah, I really like that actor. While we were watching the first one, again, another annoying thing I was doing was I kept going, I really like that actor. And for colors, in this first scene, there are already bright red sports car and bright red couches.
I did notice the red.
Yeah. Yeah. They made it pretty in your face in the beginning.
That's true. We go to the next scene where we meet our main character, Sky Riley, as played by Naomi Scott. She is on the Drew Barrymore show doing an exposition dump. I mean, a comeback apology tour. So through talking with Drew, we learned that Sky was involved in a horrific car accident in which her boyfriend who was driving the car was killed and she was hospitalized. So she has been out of the limelight for about a year due to substance abuse problems as well as injuries sustained by the car accident. But now she's back and she's here to claim her second chance.
With a new haircut.
Yes. The blonde hair really changes how Naomi Scott looks entirely.
When they did that mini flashback during the interview, I didn't even realize it was the same person at first.
It's pretty amazing how hair color changes her in particular. I don't
Yeah.
think it's as dramatic on other people, but for some reason it really transforms her.
Yeah.
But I also wondered in my head if they secretly wanted to cast Florence Pugh for this role and they just weren't able to.
It is absolutely a Florence Pugh haircut. You're so
Yes.
right. Do you know who she reminded me of to an eerie extent the entire movie? Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Oh, I see that now for sure.
I feel like they could be related. It's so eerie.
You are spot on with that.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm excited to see more of Naomi Scott, particularly because of this movie. So I'll be looking for the Sarah Michelle Gellar
Yeah.
similarities next time I watch her. So Skye leaves the Drew Barrymore set to a crowd of adoring fans who flock to her outside of the studio. She literally puts on a happy face as she poses for pictures and signs autographs.
Wearing a bright red coat.
Oh, yes. In the next scene, Skye is rehearsing choreography for a music video, but she's suddenly overcome with back pain from the injury she sustained from the car accident. And we cut to her in her dressing room, looking in the mirror and at her many scars.
I gotta say, first of all, again, very annoying. While she's doing the dancing, wearing bright red socks. But also, this is my first guess.
It's mine too.
Really?
Okay, this is a first for the podcast. We've never had people guess the same thing. Please go ahead.
Well, I have Chekhov's back pain. But I kind of felt like that was all encompassing as far as like either it's going to be something with like she's going to have pills on her because of it and like that's going to be the thing, or she's going to like get back pain at a bad time or something. I don't know if we want to count that as two different guesses. Kind of shooting from the hip here.
I feel like it's kind of all of the same piece. So I think that counts as one guess if you're good with that.
Sure, yeah.
So I was laughing because I almost called mine Chekhov's lower back pain, but then I changed it to lower back scar. The reason that I changed it to the scar in particular was because not only do they focus on the lower back scar, but also the scar across her stomach. And I predicted that this would come back later. We know that the entity causes hallucinations and often appears as the victim or the host. So I think that later in the movie, she'll have to talk herself down or convince herself that she's seeing herself, and she either convinces herself or someone else that that's not really her because the scars are missing from her doppelganger self. So I think that will be her sign to herself later that like, oh no, that's not really me because the scars aren't there. So that's my first gun.
Such a smart guess.
One of my personal indicators, I think, for Chekhov's gun is often just if there's a close-up on something.
Yeah, big.
And the way that she was clutching at her lower back and the way that they zoom in on the scars, I feel like that's often an indicator to the audience that this is going to come back later or this will be important.
I thought the exact same thing.
So yes, as she is in her dressing room, she does reach for some pills in her purse.
Which are bright yellow.
So the yellow indicated unaddressed trauma, is that right?
In the first movie, it was connected to the curse. So it was like if there was going to be an instance where there was like a big like outburst of someone who had the curse, or like an episode of hallucinations, there was like something that was bright yellow.
I see. Okay. She drops her pills in the sink when there's a knock at the door, and she's obviously very frantic about this. She needs those pills, and her mom, Elizabeth, enters the room. She is sort of overbearing stage mom. She seems to act as Skye's manager. She asks Skye if everything's fine. Skye tries to cover it up, again, put on a happy face, like, I'm fine. And then her mom and her assistant Joshua drop her off at her penthouse, and her mom, again, very overbearing, tells her, go straight to bed, But instead of going straight to bed, it's pretty funny. Skye just goes into the revolving door and revolves right back out onto the sidewalk and
I
leaves.
did like that.
There's great little moments of humor in this movie that I don't remember there being that many just sort of funny asides in the first movie.
Yeah.
So I liked how there were these little brief moments of just like jokes.
Yeah, I think the premise of her being like a pop star and like the vibe was a little different than the first one where the main character was a therapist.
Yes.
So
yes.
that was fun to have these little moments of like absurd levity.
Yes. Absurd is a good way of putting it.
I do have another kind of a joke guess.
Great. Yeah.
The problem is I'm a little thirsty. So I have to chug a full thing of VOSS. I wrote VOSS on it. I don't know if you can see.
So, listener, you can't see this, but Jen has just produced a prop in which she has written VOSS across her water bottle.
The product placement that begins in this movie so early on and is so consistent is crazy to me. We found it so distracting, but also very funny.
I'm also laughing too because this was also one of my Chekhov's guns.
No way!
Yes, the VOSS water bottle. This is hilarious. I came to this conclusion a couple scenes later, but I might as well talk about it now since we're talking about it. I also had Chekhov's VOSS water bottle, and I had to be sure to say VOSS. And as I was saying previously, I feel like a zoom in or a close-up shot on something is often an indicator of a Chekhov's gun. It's either that or it's product placement.
Yes.
So this was very much a toss-up for me. I was like, I can't tell if this is a plot point or if it's just straight up product placement.
I did
That's
the
all it is.
same thing because I wrote it jokingly at the point when it was like, you know, right before she even goes to the drug dealer. But I think a couple scenes later must be what you're thinking of that I think was
Yes.
reinforced in my head. I was like, oh, this actually might be.
This might be a thing. Yeah. Which is hilarious.
That's so funny.
So my guess was a little less jokey, but I was like, how is this going to come back later? So my guess was just that in the true sense of Chekhov's gun, it will be used as a weapon later. At some point, you know, VOSS are these heavy glass cylindrical bottles.
Yeah.
So I think at some point later, she's going to, in a hallucination fit, she's going to hit someone with this water bottle, and then she'll realize that, oh no, she's accidentally really hurt someone who she didn't mean to. She thought she was attacking the entity, but it was actually someone else. So that's my a little less jokey guess. So yes, Skye goes to her drug dealer's apartment, Lewis. This is Lewis from the first scene who witnessed the deaths at the drug dealer's house. Lewis she can't quite tell what's going on with him, but he is clearly very freaked out. He doesn't remember texting her to come over. He holds her at Katana point when she arrives at the apartment, but eventually she gets him to calm down. She says, I'm here for some Vicodin. And he goes off into the other room to find some pills for her.
And here's the thing. If a katana is introduced in Act 1, it must pay
has
off.
to slice someone by Act 3.
So pew pew, baby. I have Chekhov's katana.
I love it.
Also, the drug dealer is wearing a bright yellow striped robe.
I did notice the bright yellow robe. It's all coming together. So while Lewis is looking for the drugs, Skye sits on the couch. She eyeballs a line of coke that Lewis had been doing. You can tell she's a little bit tempted. And the TV is turned on when we get one of my favorite tropes, the coincidental broadcast, which is that the TV is just conveniently turned on to something very relevant to the main character's life.
I love that so much.
Yes. And in this case, the broadcasters are talking about Skye's return following the car accident and her substance abuse problems. So she angrily turns off the TV and she goes to find Lewis. Lewis runs screaming out of his bedroom, demanding to know what she's doing there. He's obviously very confused. He doesn't know what's going on. And then in terror, he looks behind her and over her shoulder as though he can see something behind her. And she looks behind her. There's nothing there. He's clearly terrified. And then it seems as though some sort of force is choking him to death. He falls to the floor. It seems as though he's dead, but then he gets back up after the creepy smile comes across his face. So this is our smile curse. He locks eyes with Skye. He doesn't blink. He's smiling the whole time. He slowly stands up, and in his hands, he has a 35-pound free weight that then he starts smashing his face to a pulp with, and
pretty
it's
rough.
Awful.
Yeah. As soon as he picked up the weight, I was like, oh no.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, this is going to be bad to watch and see.
Yeah, so he hits himself in the face many times, utterly demolishing his face, smiling the whole time, though, of course, before collapsing to the floor in a pool of his own blood. It seems like he's probably dead. So after this scene and following the opening scene, I felt like this was a lot gorier than I remember the first movie being. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I would.
Because I love horror movies, but I also do get squicked out if the gore degree gets a little too high. And I feel like this movie was on the edge for me. Like, sometimes, honestly, I found the gore in this movie kind of funny because it was absurd, especially later. But this scene was very gruesome, and I was like, ugh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with your assessment. I think, the beginning car accident thing was,
yes,
a little like, that's kind of crazy,
You're right.
But this was bordering on upsetting.
Yes, I agree.
In the first movie, the upsetting things that I can think of aren't necessarily like gory.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those cases where the director got a bigger budget and he decided to funnel a lot of that to the special effects.
Yeah, probably.
So, of course, Skye is horrified by what she has just witnessed, and she throws up on the floor, and she contemplates calling 911. But in that moment, she realizes what this would look like for her and what the ramifications would be for her come back to her. So she does not call 911 and instead flees the scene. This is my next Chekhov's gun. I have Chekhov's vomit. Because I thought to myself, girl, are you going to clean that up?
I know.
Vomit can and has been used for DNA evidence, forensic evidence in criminal cases. So my guess was that this would come back later because they would ID her through the vomit and place her at the scene of the crime.
Very good guess.
Skye flees Lewis's apartment. We get one of many Dutch angle shots. I feel like half of this movie is shot upside down after this scene.
Yeah.
I do like this, though. I feel like it could have been overused, but I found it not only interesting visually, but it can be taken very straightforwardly thematically. Like, oh, Skye's world is literally upside down now.
Yeah, I don't think it was overused. I don't know. Some of the choices weren't necessarily for me, but I kind of did like the upside down shots, because actually there are a couple of them in the first movie too. So I felt like it was a nice, aesthetic through line.
Sort of visual callback to the first movie. When Skye is back at her home, she chugs some water. This is where I had my original guess, because, yeah, she pulls that VOSS water bottle out of her water bottle freezer.
I literally wrote, if she doesn't beat the curse with a VOSS water bottle, I'm going to be so mad. Every room in this movie has a mini fridge that is dedicated to VOSS water.
Even the hospital.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So she is clearly traumatized by what she's seen. Who wouldn't it be? And she thinks that she imagines seeing Lewis out of the corner of her eye in her apartment that night. We cut to the next day. She clearly can't stop thinking about what she's witnessed. She's distracted. She's spacing out. And her mom scolds her for not paying attention, for not sticking to her sleep schedule, and for not staying hydrated. Get her another VOSS water bottle.
It is so frequent.
It's really honestly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Her mom also encourages her to make up with her old friend Gemma, who apparently they had parted on very bad terms. Enter Darius. Okay, I couldn't quite figure out this guy's role. Because Elizabeth, her mom, seemed to be her manager, but then this Darius guy also seems to be a manager or a promoter. He works for her record label, but beyond that, I'm not really clear what his role is.
Yeah, we were confused about that too. I don't know if there's a line that's really easy to miss or something, but
I even rewatched the scene where they introduced him because I did feel like I had missed something. I'm like, who is this guy? But anyway, all you need to know is that Darius is important to Skye's career and that it's important that she do what he asks because he seemingly has done her a lot of favors in the past or has helped her career. So he invites her to present at a fundraiser for underprivileged kids. You can tell she doesn't want to do it, but because she owes Darius one or maybe a couple hundred favors, she agrees to it, also at her mom's encouragement. Later, Skye is in her dressing room and she's frantically Googling whether vomit contains DNA.
which was very funny.
I was like, okay, she did think about it. I just appreciated that the character also at some point was like, wait a second.
Yeah, that was a really
But
nice
I did find
touch.
it funny that the Google response was, it depends. And I'm like, I think it's a little stronger of a yes than that. Not always, but I think that would be a pretty strong yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm not a forensic specialist. While she's on her phone, she looks through her text history with Gemma. She contemplates texting her, but doesn't. Their text history is not good.
One of the funniest moments of the movie for me was you're reading her text history and they're fighting and she's like saying these awful things in all capital letters. It's like, you know, shut the fuck up. And like the last message she sent to Gemma, and it is all capital letters. It says, "Eat shit, bitch." And then she goes to type out, "Hey, how have you been?" It made me laugh so hard. Just the visual of it is so good.
Oh, yeah. Imagine looking at a text history like that. You're like, oh.
Yeah. So, hey.
So how you been? But yes, she deletes the text. And at that moment, a new text message comes in from a mysterious unknown caller. And it asks her if she was at Lewis's apartment last night. Ruh-roh. Suddenly, when Skye looks back into the mirror in her dressing room, she thinks she sees Lewis standing behind her. She looks over her shoulder and there's no one there. When she looks back in the mirror, jump scare, he is pulling her lips open into a grotesque smile, which is pretty creepy. This was not the most effective of the jump scares for me, though, although it was also in the trailer, which, yet again, is one of those things where I'm like, well, maybe don't put all the jump scares in the trailer. They did save the best stuff for the movie, but...
Yeah, probably.
Her mom hears her scream and runs into the dressing room, also with her assistant, Joshua. And she says, "Oh, I saw a spider." And Joshua says, "There's a spider in here?" That was the part that made me laugh. He was very concerned about a spider.
I loved him. I loved that actor.
Yes, he was really funny. He got probably most of the funny moments. He was also in the earlier scene, he went to hug Darius and Darius was like, okay, man, you know, like literally brushes him off. Yeah, Joshua has a lot of good moments. But anyway, Skye plays it down and she said, actually, what I want to talk to you guys about is that I don't like this costume for my performance because it shows off my scars too much. So she doesn't like that about the costume and she's asking the costumer to change it.
Pew pew, Chekhov's butterfly costume.
Oh.
I was like, this is going to come back.
Okay, so we've got blue and yellow in this costume, right?
Very
so
true.
What does this indicate to you?
Well, blue is unresolved trauma and yellow is...
The curse.
Yeah, the curse, succumbing to the curse and stuff. So that, I mean, it probably indicates that, like, there's going to be some, like, awful, either a hallucination that involves the costume or, like, succumbing to the curse that includes the costume because of the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly no, like, I don't sense, like, triumph from the colors in the costume because, you know, otherwise it wouldn't be unresolved trauma.
True. In our next scene, Skye is at a fan meet and greet when a super fan... Oh, sorry. Yes,
so
go ahead.
Sorry. This is crazy because what I have named it won't make any sense. I have... Stay with me. Chekhov's Vagina Cave. Now, I will explain. I will explain.
Hold on just a second. Is this in the dressing room or is this at the...
No, this is when they were rehearsing on the stage.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So there's that, like, it's like an egg thing that she's in. So Rachel and I have been watching horror movies for years. And forever ago, we watched just an awful, awful, awful horror movie, the name of which is lost to time. neither of us remember. But in it was this like cave that like looked like a vagina. And so we called it Vagina Cave. And it was like a running joke for years. So when we saw the like egg thing, we were like, it's Vagina Cave. And that's what I had to name the guess.
I know you've only seen the first Alien movie. If you watched any of the other Alien movies, you'd just be saying Vagina Cave all the time.
Sounds like a great time. That's great. So yeah, and I knew that I would have to explain myself if I called it that, but I couldn't bring myself to call it anything else. So.
Explain yourself, Jen.
Yeah.
No, I'm so glad you did. How do you think this Vagina Cave is going to come back later?
Well, I figured someone would either be trapped in it or that something horrendous would emerge from it. That was kind of what I was thinking.
Very alien coded for sure.
Oh, yes. I have to watch the Alien movies.
Amazing. I love it. You know, we need more guesses like Vagina Cave on this show.
That's what I'm here for. I wanted to bring the Vagina Cave energy.
Hashtag Lady Pod Squad.
Yeah.
So yes, as Jen was saying, I skipped over the dress performance rehearsal thing because I didn't think it was relevant to the plot, but I'm glad that you did. After that scene is when we go to the fan meet and greet, and this is where we see Alfredo. He is a super fan that's getting too handsy, too overzealous. He confesses his love for Skye, not in the typical fan way, but in the obsessed stalkerish way, saying things like, I can make you happy, run away with me, etc. Security has to escort him out. She's obviously rattled by this. Who wouldn't it be? But she rallies and again puts her best face forward to meet a little girl who's incredibly creepy. This poor little girl. I'm sure she's a perfectly nice person / little girl in real life, but she does a good creepy face, and she's got these cute little pigtails and braces, but nothing about her little kid demeanor can make up for the horrible, creepy smile that she is sending Skye's way.
Yeah, I would argue that her little kid demeanor makes it worse.
That's true. And, you know, classic horror movie trope, having innocent do something creepy or evil. It's a very good dichotomy.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who, like, a creepy kid in a movie, I'm like, whoa, no.
Back.
And we were laughing so hard, too, because we were like, is no one else seeing this? Like, clearly, we know
Yes,
it's in her mind,
question.
but we kept being like if we were Skye, we would be like, hey, is anybody else seeing this? Or like, the kid is also like smiling creepily at her, like, while they're taking the picture and everything. So I wanted her to like, I said, I would have gone over to the photographer and been like, can I see that picture?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Is this all in my head, or was this little girl actually being a real creepster?
Yeah.
Although, you know, little kids, they can be creepy.
Very true.
They like to stare at adults sometimes, you know.
So
I would
true.
say kids younger than that child's age, you know, like 6-year-olds, they'll just stare at you and you're like, kid, what's up?
Can I help you?
So back at her apartment in the next scene, Skye rereads the mysterious text, but she doesn't reply to it. Instead, she looks again at her history with Gemma and she decides to call her and leave a voicemail. Much to her surprise and relief, Gemma immediately calls back and Skye invites her over to her place to talk, and Gemma agrees. While she waits for Gemma to arrive, Skye chugs some more VOSS water.
And also, I was so sorry to go back, but after the creepy fan interaction, and she's like taking a minute, her momager walks up to her and just wordlessly offers her a VOSS. We cracked up.
I didn't notice that. Okay, there are so many instances. It's a good thing that you and I are not playing a drinking game of the VOSS water bottles, because we would be drunk unless we were drinking VOSS water. TM.
There you go. That's probably what they want you to do.
Yes. So she's chugging down some water. She places the bottle on the countertop very conspicuously. We get a lingering shot on it, so you know something's going to happen. And then she's noodling around on the piano, singing, when suddenly she hears the crash of glass. She goes back into the kitchen to see that the water bottle has smashed upon the floor, but you can still clearly see the VOSS lettering, so don't worry, it's fine.
Fully intact, label up.
They're really shameless with their product placement in this movie.
It was crazy.
It should have been called Smile 2, brought to you by VOSS.
Literally. We couldn't believe that actually a VOSS water bottle ended up being relevant to the plot. We were shocked.
I mean, I was hoping because it was one of my Chekhov's gun guesses. Yeah.
I was willing to take the hit though. I was like, I'll lose the point. It's worth it.
It is worth it. Because she goes to clean up the glass and she notices then that it's not just the broken glass on the floor, but also a bright yellow shirt that she had signed for Alfredo at the fan event, the creepy guy. She's wary now and she turns the corner and she sees more than just the shirt. She sees a whole line of Alfredo's clothes lined up on the floor.
Which is so crazy. As soon as, if I'm her, as soon as I see the shirt, I connect it to that guy and I'm like, this is not good. And I get out. Why do you investigate?
Yes. And also, so Sky is supposed to be this mega pop star.
Yeah.
You know, like up there with like, I don't know, Billie Eilish or something. You would think she would have a security guard outside her door, maybe? I don't know. Maybe pop stars don't.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I knew more about that pop star life.
Were you not paying attention to the movie at all? You're not supposed to want the pop star life.
Listen, I want what I want. I can't be deterred by VOSS water and,
You can't be deterred by VOSS water or by creepy stalkers that are leaving their skid mark underwear in your apartment.
How crazy was that?
I'm like, that's a detail we didn't need. Thank you very much.
And Rachel goes, when they showed it, Rachel goes, it's bright yellow. Oh, man. Why has there been such a trend in recent years in horror movies of people just like being naked for no reason?
That's a good point. Yes. So she sees Alfredo standing naked at the end of the darkened hallway. Fortunately, we don't see anything. There's, strategically placed shadows and lighting and what have you. Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like, naked body, be afraid. I don't know if that's the message we want to be sending.
Yeah, it's so fun. I feel like I could name a bunch of movies.
It Follows has a pretty memorable naked scene. I don't know. Maybe we can blame it all on The Shining and the old woman in the bathtub.
Oh, maybe. But I feel like that was longer ago. I feel like it hasn't been consistently since then. But Hereditary does it. It did it.
True.
I feel like, the last 7 years or so, it's been pretty consistent that people are like, okay, someone needs to be creepy in this scene. Make them naked. Take their clothes off.
And done and done.
I'll say in this, it actually works more because it's more horrifying because he's this creepy stalker guy.
Yes.
But typically I feel like I'm like, now there was no reason for them to take their clothes off.
Yeah, it's a little bit more effective here. And it's especially effective when he starts charging at her down the hallway. She runs away in terror and she is about to flee out her front door. But when she opens the door, her friend Gemma is standing there. Sky doesn't really explain what's going on, but Gemma can tell that she's freaked out and she follows her into the apartment, only for them to discover that there's no one else there. And thank God the VOSS water bottle is fine. It is on the countertop in one piece.
It wasn't actually broken with the label intact facing up. It was just
Which
on
obviously
the counter.
would have been worse than having a stalker, but
Yes.
thank goodness it was just a hallucination.
And I believe she chugs another full bottle of VOSS water.
She does, indeed. They try to make it somewhat thematically important. She explains to Gemma that her therapist told her whenever she gets the urge to use that she should instead drink water because it'll be a way of her to indicate to herself what she can and cannot control. So it's sort of a way for her to tackle her urges and bring back the locus of control to herself. So they do try to make it a little bit more than product placement.
But,
Successfully, maybe not. Sky is very grateful that Gemma is there. She thanks her for getting there so fast, to which Gemma says, "You called me over an hour ago." So we can see that Sky is starting to succumb to these distortions of not only reality, but also time and space, just like we saw with Lewis and other characters. Sky apologizes to Gemma for being an asshole, and Gemma very quickly forgives and forgets. Well, maybe not forgets, but at least forgives. Sky explains to Gemma everything that's been going on. She completely opens up. She says that she witnessed Lewis's death, and Gemma offers to stay the night. That night, Sky flashes back to the horrible scene of the car accident. She is back there in the car. Her leg is broken and the bones are sticking out of her leg, and it's real gross. And she looks over and she sees her dead boyfriend beside her. She wakes up from this nightmare with a start. Gemma is there in the bed beside her. She is sleeping over, and this calms down Sky a little bit, and Gemma tries to reassure her. Sky opens up about how horrible her thoughts are and how she feels like she's trapped in her head a lot. And Gemma replies, "Well, maybe that's because you're a horrible person." And when Sky looks back at her, she's got the creepy smile.
The turn.
The smile. Oh no. This is probably my favorite jump scare of the movie, or at least it was the most effective one for me. So when Sky is looking at Gemma, suddenly there's this blast of a car horn and car headlights, and it looks as though the sound and the light of the headlights are coming out of Gemma's face.
Yeah.
It's like it's projecting from her face. You can see this veininess across her, as though the light is so bright within her skull that it's just like shining out, bursting out. I don't know. I found it an effective / surprising imagery.
It was a really cool effect.
I liked it. But then Sky really wakes up and it's the next morning. So again, she's having this sort of time dilation problem, and she is very late for something. So she needs to rush out of the apartment. She has a dress rehearsal. She invites Gemma to join her on her tour, and Gemma's like, "Oh, I've made other commitments to other friends." And Sky is like, "Other people? What's that?" So we get kind of a glimpse into maybe why their friendship broke down. So Sky is late, much to everyone's chagrin, but she does make it to the dress rehearsal for her performance. As she's rehearsing on the stage with backup dancers, she sees a flash of someone right in front of her face, smiling at her, of course. She freaks out and trips over, and she hallucinates that she has broken her leg just like she did in the car accident. The bones are poking out and all that. But when the lights come on and everyone rushes to her, she looks at her leg. Everything's fine. People are saying, "No, everyone was in their place. There wasn't anyone in front of you. We were watching the monitors, etc." So freaked out, Sky flees off stage, and as she's walking in the back hallways, she sees her assistant Joshua smiling at her creepily. And when she arrives in her dressing room, it's completely trashed. The TV is broken on the floor. Everything is smashed. Everything is smashed. I can't talk. I'm just not going to say that.
Well, you didn't do your warm-ups, your tongue twisters, like
I
Sky
know,
did
yeah.
before, which I'll point out, her tongue twisters are about water, which I was
gosh,
like, are they trying to subliminally message us to be thirsty?
What was it? I asked the waiter for a bottle of water.
Yeah,
Was that it?
yeah, it was something like that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't believe it.
I'm going to do VOSS branded tongue twisters as warm up before each podcast now.
Yes, yeah, you should. And you should reach out to VOSS and say, "Hey, we talk about you a lot in this episode. You should probably
Would
pay
you like
me."
to sponsor my podcast?
Yeah.
That would be hilarious. I wouldn't say no.
Yeah.
Sky freaks out. She accuses Joshua of being the one to smash her dressing room. He denies it. Sky's mom, Elizabeth, takes her aside and asks her, "Are you using again? Because it does really seem like Sky might be on drugs." Sky denies it. She says no. Doesn't seem like her mom entirely believes her. She's basically like, "Okay, whatever, honey. Just make sure you have your shit together for the underprivileged youth fundraiser tonight." Sky pushes back, says, "I don't think I can do this fundraiser," but her mom basically tells her how it's going to be. She's going to stick with the tour, and she's going to do that fundraiser tonight. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, momager sucks.
Momager. Backstage at the fundraiser later that night, Skye gets yet another text from the mysterious number. And this time the person says they know she's Skye Riley. This frays her already very frayed nerves, and a bug lands on her face and she swipes it away angrily, smearing her lipstick in a very Joker-esque, grotesque smile across her face. And no one tells her to fix her makeup before going on stage, but sure.
No last looks, nothing.
I know. Things don't get any better for her as she goes out on stage. The teleprompter is broken, so she has to improvise a speech that basically turns into an unhinged rant about how horrible the pop star life is and about how hard it is to be her. It's very cringe.
Yeah.
Everyone in the audience is like, oh God. And you can see them whispering to each other. They are probably also suspecting that she has fallen off the wagon.
Probably. Rachel, when this was happening, Rachel goes, has she never had any media training?
I know, right? You would expect her to have enough media training to improvise a brief speech, but apparently not.
But, you know, she's under a lot of stress with the curse, you know.
There's a killer curse infecting her brain, you know.
I guess couldn't hear you. I don't know.
The teleprompter does come back on, and it seems about to save the day, but then it prompts her to say, go fuck yourself, San Diego. Oh, no, I mean, actually, it prompted her to say that the next guest on stage would be Paul Hudson, but Paul Hudson, Ruh-roh, is her dead boyfriend who died in the car accident. She is enraged. She thinks that someone is playing a trick on her, putting his name in the teleprompter. But then when she looks out to the audience, she sees Paul there in the audience smiling at her. And I do want to point out that the actor who plays Paul is Ray Nicholson, Jack Nicholson's son.
Oh my God, I didn't know. Nepo baby.
Yeah, Nepo baby. But also, you know, who better to tap for a creepy smile than someone in the Nicholson family?
Very fair. I actually like that actor a lot.
So throughout the whole movie, were you also like, I like that guy?
Not quite the same because he wasn't in it as much. If he was in it more, I would have. I did. Every time he would show up, I would internally lament the fact that his character was dead.
Oh. Well, fortunately for you, we do get to see a little bit more of him, not only in this scene when he is stalking toward Skye on the stage. She is truly freaking out now. She's yelling. She's saying, you're dead. Stop smiling at me. In her moment of pique, she thinks that she is pushing him away from her. But in actuality, she has pushed an elderly usher woman off the stage, and this woman goes crashing into a banquet table. And then that's when the shit really hits the fan for Skye.
It shouldn't have been funny.
Throwing an old woman off the stage, how dare you?
I don't know why we laughed, but we did. I mean, obviously not like, you know, it wasn't intentionally. We weren't like, ha. But
right.
There was something absurd about it that tickled us for some reason. We were like, of course she pushes the old woman.
I think it is funny in the extremity of it. You know, it's
yes,
like,
exactly.
How can we make Skye look really bad? I know.
Yeah.
The only way it could have been worse is if it were like a kid on crutches or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But what's interesting though, is I think when after she like the old woman falls, she pushes her. And she kind of like comes to and like, is looking around. I think the teleprompter still says her dead boyfriend's name.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Maybe a continuity error there.
Yeah.
In the next scene, Skye is back at home. She is anxiously texting Gemma and pulling at her hair. This is something we see her do a lot throughout the movie. Whenever she's feeling particularly anxious, she starts pulling out her hair, which we also saw in a flashback when she had woken up at the hospital after her car accident. So this is a nervous tic she has. Gemma's not responding, but instead the mysterious caller sends yet another text and essentially says, you're in danger, we need to meet, you're not imagining things, it's all real. And to prove that they know what they're talking about, they also send Skye a video filmed by Lewis in his apartment when he was hallucinating, seeing things. We get another jump scare. More jump scares for everyone. This convinces Skye to meet the mysterious texter, who is named Morris. She meets Morris at a bar, and this is where Morris explains the whole situation to Sky/the audience. He explains that Lewis was infected, possessed, and then murdered by some sort of malicious supernatural force, spirit, demon, entity thing, whatever you want to call it. He says that the entity acts like a parasite. It infects the host's mind and feeds off of all the bad things in their head, which makes them go crazy. Eventually, usually after 7 days, call back to the ring, this forces the host to kill themselves in front of a witness. And then that person who witnesses the act then becomes the new host for the parasite entity. And the whole time he is explaining this, Sky is ignoring calls from her mom, from Darius, from her agency, from her PR firm. There's been a leaked video of her shoving Granny off the stage. So things are not looking good for Sky. She's in a very desperate moment.
I gotta say, I loved Morris. I found him very likable, very charming. My favorite thing about the scene, though, is that on the seat behind her, over her shoulder, it says, someone's written in Sharpie, "You're fucked." I thought that was a nice detail.
That is a good detail. But Morris thinks maybe she might not be entirely fucked because he has an idea. He thinks that the way to defeat the parasite is for the host to die in a way that is outside of the parasite's control. And Sky is not so keen on this idea. She's like, wait, you want to kill me? And he's like, well, yeah, but only technically. Yeah. He explains that he is an ER nurse, and in a controlled environment, he thinks that he could stop her heart, killing the parasite, and then resuscitate her, and it'll be all gravy.
Truly an insane ask.
Yes.
I mean, you know, what other choice does she have, you know? But a
yes.
Crazy suggestion.
She hasn't quite gotten to the tipping point yet where she's willing to accept this potential solution. So, you know, like I think most people would do, she's like, fuck that. Yeah. I don't think so. She rushes out of the bar. Also because the bar crowd has now noticed that she is Sky. So she hightails it out of there.
Which we were like, look, she's got a hat on. I wouldn't have recognized her.
Yeah, no, she looked pretty incognito.
Yeah.
It's not like she had on the butterfly costume or something.
Yeah.
Sky has maybe a less good plan than Morris. She seems to think that she can, I don't know, outrun the parasite because she goes home and she starts packing her bags frantically. And I'm like, girl, where are you going?
I know. It's not like It Follows where, like, you know,
yes.
the entity is outside of you.
Yeah, no, everywhere you go, there you are.
Exactly,
you know.
Exactly. So you run from your problems, but your problems are internal, man.
That's true. Yeah, so deep. As she's packing, she turns on the light in her walk-in closet and jump scare. There's a whole gaggle of smiling people in her closet watching her every move. She looks away, I think trying to convince herself that they're not there. But when she looks back, not only are all those people there, but they're several steps closer to her, even though she didn't see them move. So they seem to mostly be creeping upon her when her back is turned. Okay, I can't decide if this scene is purposefully silly or is meant to be purely scary, because I found it fucking hilarious.
It was so
I was just
funny.
Like, this is...
It was like, because there's something inherently absurd about, like, just the smile, right? So,
yes.
But when it's one person who's like standing there still and they're just like, yee, that can be creepy. But when it's a bunch of people doing Bob Fosse jazz hands and smiling,
yeah. They're like, let me vogue at you.
Yeah, the absurdity level goes way up, and it was so funny.
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most of these people that she's hallucinating are her backup dancers.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so it's this group of, you know, what look like to me at first glance theater kids.
Yeah.
So it's like this troupe of scary theater kids, and I'm just like, that's not scary.
You know what? Actually, as a theater kid, that does make it a little more terrifying to me.
Yeah, theater kids are scary.
They can be
ruthless. Yeah, I don't know. I found this hilarious. It was like red light, green light, but make it creepy. I don't know. I'm just workshopping some more jokes here. It's like if Boo from Mario was reincarnated as an improv troupe.
I like that one a lot. That was good.
So yes, this mob of maybe scary question mark dancers finally descend upon Sky. They corner her. They are all over her. They're clawing at her and her clothes. They're pulling out her hair.
They do a little choreographed dance first, though.
Yes. Let us do the Chicago meme thing that's been going around first. We'll just do some high kicks.
Yeah. Just a lift and yeah.
She gets another flashback to the night of the car accident, and this is when we get the full picture of what really happened. As suspected, or at least as I suspected, even though Paul was behind the wheel, it turns out the accident was Sky's fault. Well, it's both their fault, but they were both doing coke. They're arguing. It's this horrible knockdown, screaming match between them, which ends with them saying how much they hate each other. He calls her a psycho bitch, and in that moment of high drama, she grabs the wheel of the car, sending them careening off a hillside, which ended up killing Paul.
Yeah.
This was also an interesting shot because it very literally places you, the viewer, in the middle of the argument. It's as though there was like a very tiny bucket seat between the driver and the passenger, and you're sat there. The shot is point of view between the two of them. So it's as though it looks to Sky almost as though it's from Paul's point of view. And then the camera turns as though it's a head turning, looking toward Paul from Sky's point of view. So it's one of those like shots that could be kind of gimmicky, and it is kind of gimmicky, but I thought it was effective and an interesting way to shoot the scene.
No, yeah, that's a good point. I agree. I liked it in that scene. And maybe it was because it did kind of evoke a head turning. There's at least one other scene that was very like reverse shot over and over again. That was back in the apartment with Gemma that I was like, boy, they really haven't done anything else visually in a while.
Oh yeah.
but it worked. It worked in this scene really well, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so too. When Sky wakes up from her flashback, she is in a private hospital with an IV in her arm. Her mom, Elizabeth, is beside her, and so is Joshua. Joshua excuses himself after leaving a sweatshirt for Sky. And not to worry, there's an entire cooler fridge full of VOSS water bottles. Mm-hmm. So things can't be all bad for Sky.
It'll be fine. And her mom also says, you fell and hit your head. Doctor said you were sleep deprived and extremely dehydrated. Literally impossible. We were dying.
Remember, kids, drink your VOSS water or else the smile curse will get you.
Yep. A VOSS water a day.
Keeps the smile curse away. That's what I've always been told anyway.
That's what this movie taught me.
Her mom also explains, once again, how it's going to be. She lays down the law. She says that Sky is just going to spend the day recuperating, and she's going to rally, and she is going to do her performance the next day. But this is the final straw for Sky. She snaps. She says, I refuse to be your dancing monkey anymore. I'm not going to do the tour. And she also accuses her mom of caring only about the money and not about her. This also makes her mom furious, and she does the standard line of, I've sacrificed everything for you. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't even have this career. But then that dreaded smile appears on Elizabeth's face, and she smashes the mirror. She takes one of the mirror shards and starts stabbing herself with it, including in the eye. She rips out her own eyeball. It's very gross.
Yeah.
Sky tries to rush out of the room, but when she arrives at the door, she realizes, she's holding a shard of glass in her hand, and she's covered with blood. It turns out, at least to her mind, that she was the one attacking her mom. So she goes over to her mom's side. Her mom is there on the floor, dying, covered in blood. It seems like she's drawing her last breaths as Sky looks on in horror.
And this is exactly why you shouldn't have family as your managers.
It can only go wrong.
Yeah, you need a separate support system to the people you work with. Otherwise, someone will end up getting stabbed with a shard of a mirror. Classic mistake.
I mean, if I had a nickel for every time. There's a funny little interchange here between Sky and Joshua at the door because Joshua's trying to get back into the room. She keeps trying to put him off. She says that she's thirsty, and
right.
he helpfully reminds her that there's a whole fridge full of water in the room.
That's right, he does. And then she's like, no, I really want soda. We were like, VOSS is not going to be happy about this.
VOSS will be furious. He better get her a no-name generic soda.
Yeah.
She decides she can't flee the room covered in blood, so she puts on the sweatshirt that Joshua had left for her. And I just want to briefly mention this because the sweatshirt, it's not a Chekhov's gun, but I think it's funny because in some small ways it is, because he's like, here's this sweatshirt, let's have this very inconsequential object that's here for some reason. But I would say it's not a Chekhov's gun for several reasons. The payoff comes directly after the setup, even within the same scene. Like there's not a long length of time between the setup and the payoff. And also it's really not important to the plot. Sure, she puts on the sweatshirt and it disguises the blood for a little while.
Disguises the blood.
Right. Well, I also think it's hilarious because she's sneaking out of her room. She's going towards the lobby of the hospital in an attempt to escape. And it's also, this is one of those moments of levity. She's trying to be incognito, covered in blood. And also she's wearing a sweatshirt that has a giant picture of her own face on it.
I think it's also yellow, isn't it?
I think so.
Because Rachel was like, girl, if all of your merch is yellow, you need to get better merch.
It's true. So worst disguise ever.
Yeah, and the bloody hospital gown is peeking out from the sweatshirt.
Yes, and Joshua notices it immediately as he's bringing her a soda, and he freaks out because he thinks that she's injured. He calls a lot of attention to her, including the security guard, and Skye swipes the gun from the security guard, and she is trying to exit the hospital. Right as she's leaving, Darius enters to come visit her, and he tells her, think about the tour, and Skye says, fuck the tour. So I guess she did the opposite of the Justin Timberlake, which was, this is going to ruin the tour. What tour? The world tour.
That's so true. That should be a new meme.
Yes, it should.
Did you notice, by the way, the soda that Joshua got for her?
No. Was it VOSS?
It wasn't. It was Squirt. And he's like, I got you a soda, and it's fully labeled out. And we were like,
okay,
what?
Same parent company as VOSS?
We Googled it. No.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
This is the most shocking part of the movie so far.
Right?
Oh my gosh. With the gun, Skye runs out of the hospital, and conveniently, she is intercepted by Gemma outside the hospital. And I was like, oh, that's very convenient. But we soon learned why it was, in fact, so convenient. Mm-hmm. So they are driving away together. Skye tells Gemma she should just leave her behind. Gemma says, nah, bitch, we're ride or die. But just then, Skye gets a call from the real Gemma, who it turns out has not forgiven her, had never come to her apartment at any point. This whole time, she has been hallucinating the other Gemma. And when she looks back at doppelganger Gemma, she is doing that creepy smile from behind the wheel. I thought that this was a fun little twist. It wasn't totally surprising, but I do like how they maneuvered the Gemma character so that it kind of worked in the movie. It's sort of like the Sixth Sense, where in retrospect you realize that no other characters in the movie have interacted with Gemma except for Skye. But they try to cleverly disguise that, because there is a point earlier in the movie where Elizabeth, Skye's mom, arrives at the penthouse while Gemma supposedly is there. And Gemma says, hi, Elizabeth, but Elizabeth is off frame. And so we don't get Elizabeth's reaction, and Elizabeth never says anything back to her. So I thought that was a sneaky way of trying to get the viewer to think that Gemma was not a hallucination. But in fact, she was, because no one saw her. Anyway, I liked it. I thought it was good.
I liked the idea that Gemma was never... that was all, hallucinations. My thing is, I was so confused when this reveal happened. I was like, the curse is driving her? That doesn't make sense. Who's actually driving? Because typically, like in the first movie, it felt like the rules of the curse were like, you would hallucinate things, but you would, it would typically be someone who was physically present.
And it would just sort of take on.
Right, yeah. Like one of the first lines in the movie, the girl who succumbs to the curse in the beginning of the first movie says, it wears people as a mask, or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Implying that it, like, the person is there, physically there with you, but like what you are seeing on their face and hearing from them is the hallucination. The other times, like when she, in the first movie, when she does imagine like more vivid, like actions that didn't actually happen, it turns out that she like was asleep. So this was a little bit of a departure from that for me, that I was like, wait, what are the rules?
That's a good question. This is something that actually I appreciated about the movie, on the other hand, which is that I feel like horror sequels tend to default to explainer mode.
Yeah.
Like in the sequel for a horror movie, they'll be like, okay, now we're going to demystify what the whole thing is. We're going to give you the backstory as to how the central horror of our movie came to be. We're going to explain why it's like that. We're going to explain why the rules are this way. So I sort of appreciated that Smile 2 didn't go down that route of being like, and this is when the smile first appeared, or like flashing back to, I don't know, like the 1800s or something, and being like, and that's why the curse works this way,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I appreciated that it didn't try to do that hand-holding horror trope that, frankly, I just find it less scary, which is usually why I don't like when sequels go into explainer mode. But on the other hand, you're right. We do need to have a certain set of rules that are internally consistent,
right,
in order for the movie to be its most effective.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to be like super rigid rules. There can be room, for exploration,
Mm-hmm.
because I agree with you. It is like creepier when you don't know everything. But it was enough of a break from how the curse had worked in the first movie that I was like, hold on.
Right. I have to assume in this case we are meant to believe that Skye, I guess, was driving the car, because she does try to regain control from the entity. She screws her eyes shut and she repeats to herself, I'm in control, I'm in control. And when she opens her eyes again, she is behind the wheel of the car. So I think I have to assume that if an outsider were to be witnessing the scene that we just saw,
it was her driving.
They would see Skye behind the wheel of the car, I guess,
just
arguing
like
with herself. Yes. Skye drives the car to meet Morris at an abandoned Pizza Hut on Staten Island. I just like that it was a Pizza Hut. I don't know. Those are very iconic buildings.
It was really funny to us too, because Rachel goes, do you think Pizza Hut also paid them money?
Pizza Hut's like, this is the way to revive our franchise.
Yeah, it didn't quite feel like the same vibe where the Pizza Hut was framed in such a positive light as the VOSS water.
True. Maybe if they had those old chandeliers with the glasswork that said Pizza Hut everywhere, then it would have been better product placement.
That would have been so good.
But no, instead they are just there to use the creepy, uninviting walk-in freezer. Skye has agreed to Morris's crazy plan. They go into the freezer. There is a operating table there. Morris explains that they're going to use the freezer to slow down her body's vital functions. He plans to stop her heart and then to really ensure that the parasite has left her. Only after 9 minutes have passed will he inject her heart with adrenaline to resuscitate her and, hopefully bring her back before brain death, I guess.
Now, I'm no doctor, but I would love to know how sound the science is here, because my guess is not very.
My gut feeling is also, that doesn't quite pass the smell test.
Yeah, like, I get the idea of it, but my understanding with brain stuff is that it's more like if your brain is deprived of oxygen for several minutes, that's the problem. A freezer doesn't do shit with that.
Her brain is going to be denied oxygen for 9 minutes regardless of how cold or warm she is. So, no, it does not seem like a sound plan to me either.
It would be, at this point, I'd be like, okay, Morris, I don't think this is going to work.
No, I'm going to peace out of here. Morris props open the door with a cinder block and says, if it closes, it can't be opened from the inside. And I was like, Chekhov's freezer door. No, this wasn't a real guess, but I did want to mention it because kind of like the sweatshirt, it's almost like a mini Chekhov's gun. Like, they make a point to be like, oh, don't close this door or else you'll be trapped inside. But then it doesn't really have a payoff. It's like, yes, the door does close on her, obviously, but does it really matter ultimately?
Yeah.
And I would say no,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It could have had some potential there, though.
It could have. I felt like there were several moments like that in the movie where they would like point something out that felt very deliberate. Yeah, that was one of them.
And then be like, okay.
Yeah.
Before he performs the killing Skye experiment, Morris leaves and Skye is attacked by the evil doppelganger of herself. The doppelganger takes the form of Skye of the night of the car accident. This is back when she had the long dark hair and her makeup is all smeared. She's looking very rough. And to go back to your previous point of how usually the entity wears someone else as a mask, do we have to assume that she is fighting?
Herself?
Is she just like throwing herself around?
Is,
like, is it like a Fight Club
stop hitting
situation?
I guess. I don't know how else that would work. Like,
Yeah.
the curse, like, we kept talking, like, you know, why can the curse touch her? It didn't feel like that happened in the first movie either.
That's true.
Also, the hospital gown she puts on for this crazy Frankenstein experiment is pink.
Pink. Yeah.
And I think it's like
True.
the only time in the movie that someone wears pink. So that did feel significant to me.
Interesting. Skye and Skye are fighting each other. Evil Skye sticks her thumbs in Skye's mouth to make her smile, but good Skye bites off the thumbs. I thought that was an instance of the goriness being a little silly, so it made me laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
Evil Skye's eyes go all large Marge. This was also, I thought, bordering on creepy versus funny, and I don't think it was meant to be funny, but I found it funny. I don't know. Maybe it was meant to be funny.
It was definitely absurd. It was a little
yes,
absurd.
definitely absurd. In the middle of the tussle, good Skye decides that now is the time to inject herself with the euthanasia drug to hopefully kill the parasite. She shoves the syringe into her neck and depresses the plunger, and it seems like she's dying, or is she? She comes back out of her swoon, and evil Skye asserts that she's the one in control. She very ominously tells her, break a leg out there. What could she be talking about? What's real? What's a hallucination? I don't know. We cut to Skye emerging from the vagina cave.
Yes.
She is not in a freezer on Staten Island in an old Pizza Hut. She is on stage in the middle of her performance. It's a full house. The audience is completely packed. They are all cheering for her. And her mom is there too, miming for her to smile. The most unrealistic part about this scene is that I didn't see a single audience member with a cell phone trained on the stage.
Oh my God. You're so right.
That's where the movie lost me. I'm like, this is too unrealistic.
Okay, immersion broken.
And as Skye looks around the stage, she sees evil doppelganger Skye also on stage, smiling. Evil Skye is wearing the butterfly costume. She rips open the mesh panel, revealing the scar across her stomach. And then she also rips open the scar, and out pop two huge, meaty, monstrous, horrible arms. The entity emerges from the scar, very literally emerges from her trauma. I was asking myself, what is this, the substance? Like, I don't know what this meat creature is supposed to be, but there's this huge looming meat creature that is coming out of Skye, evil Skye, and it reaches across the stage and it puts its huge, meaty, gross, skeletal hands all over Skye's face and then literally rips her face open in a horrible smile. Not a real smile, sort of a parody of a smile.
Yeah, that was also pretty gruesome, actually.
That was really gruesome.
But the monster design confuses me a little bit because it seems to be the same, or at least a very similar design from the first movie. At the end of the first movie, there's kind of like a manifestation of the creature that I think is supposed to be like a distorted version of her mother who had died when she was a kid. And it looks so similar in this one. And I was kind of like, well, wait a second. Why would she see the same creature? Why wouldn't she see like a distorted version of her ex?
Yes. Who died in the car accident? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe we do need an explainer sequel.
Yeah. Give us the full backstory of the creature. Exactly what we said we didn't want.
Right. That being said, I did like the creature design. It's sort of reminiscent of The Thing in a certain way. This amorphous thing that can obviously take on different forms, but it's also very scary due to its sheer size and the idea that it's crammed inside the body or the head of its human host.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that it gives you just enough of a glimpse of the monster. It never stays on the monster long enough for you to get a complete image of what it looks like, which I think is effective. You just get like fleeting shots. I think especially of like the face part. We don't see the face too much.
Are you sure? I thought we did. I could have sworn I remembered a shot where like there were several rows of teeth.
I mean, we do see it, yes. Like, yeah, sorry, don't get me wrong. We do see it. It kind of even seems to be like birthing itself from Sky's torso, and we do see its face come out of her body very explicitly, but it's not a long drawn out shot. Yeah. It's maybe like a second. It's like you get to see a little bit of it, or you get to see all of it, but only for a brief moment. So I feel like I enjoyed that it's still left a little to the imagination, even though we do get a pretty explicit shot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So after Sky's face is horribly ripped open, we cut to, once again, she is laying on the stage. She has collapsed. The audience is murmuring. They're worried. As she slowly rises to her feet, her back is turned toward the audience. It's also turned toward the camera, so we, the audience at home, can't see her. And when she turns back around, she is smiling. Uh-oh. We cut away from Sky to a shot of the audience as though we are from the point of view of the stage, not necessarily from Sky's point of view, but looking out onto the audience from the perspective of the stage. We watch as the audience looks on as Sky kills herself. We hear these horrible squelching, crunching noises. When we go back to Sky, she is collapsed on the stage. Her bedazzled microphone is shoved into her eye socket. She is dead. And she is smiling. Cut to the end credits and the song Love Will Be the Death of Me. And that's the end of the movie.
Wow. Yeah.
I really enjoyed this ending scene. It was one of those scenes where in hindsight, I was like, oh, I really should have seen that coming, that she was going to, or the entity was going to force her to kill herself on stage in front of thousands of witnesses, thereby, I assume, spreading the curse to thousands more hosts. I enjoyed this a lot because so far we've only seen the parasite infect one host at a time. So I like that the scale, the stakes have been upped for the sequel. You kind of have to up the stakes in a sequel. Yeah. So to have it end on the premise that perhaps now this entire audience is infected by the smile curse, I thought that was a really good ending.
Yeah. We did call it.
Yes, I mean, like in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, of course. But it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm glad I didn't see it coming because I was enough surprised that I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah. That's a good way to end the movie.
Yeah. It was interesting. Like, it does raise the question, like, is that how the curse works? Does it pass to every single person who is in that audience? Because if it is like a physical entity, then how does it...
Right.
Litigating the specifics of the creature again.
This was definitely forecasted, not only just because of the premise, but also at one point Morris says that he believes the parasite has been waiting for someone, quote, like her.
That's right.
So I think that Morris was also maybe guessing that the parasite had chosen her or sought out her because she does have such a large audience and therefore it could spread itself at a wider scale.
Yeah.
And I do also think that this was deliberately trying to set up a sequel. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I hope we make enough money. And if we do, this is what the sequel is going to be about. Not only did this perform very well monetarily, but also as far as reception went. So I think we will be seeing a sequel to this movie. And I think the premise will be, what does the world look like when the parasite, the entity, is everywhere?
It's gotta, right? I mean, you know, if it infected all those people, which is very interesting. I would be interested to see how they dealt with that.
Yeah, I'm excited for a sequel. I enjoyed both of these movies a lot. I think I agree with the general audience that this movie was maybe a little bit better than the first Smile movie. It's certainly bigger in a lot of ways, bigger scale, bigger budget, bigger stakes, bigger gore, just like everything's dialed up to 11. I did like the small scale, the sort of more intimate story of the first Smile movie. As I said, Smile really evoked The Ring for me. Smile 2 did not, just because it was a very different feel, very different setting, but I still enjoyed it for what it was.
I liked the movie. I personally think, like, for me, the first one worked better.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a little, do you ever have that thing happen where, like, you think a movie is okay, and then everybody is like, oh my god, this movie, and you feel crazy?
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely.
I feel a little bit like that with this movie, because I enjoyed it.
Sure.
But the way people are talking about it is a little, for me personally, I felt like the first one stuck the landing more, I guess. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending of this one, which does seem to be a common critique, where, like, the whole last 20-30 minutes of the movie was an hallucination, which is, like, that essentially means that there was no third act because it was all fake. And also, like,
yes,
it does, like, ask the question, like, what was real and what wasn't. Now, like, granted, sometimes that's the point of a movie,
mm-hmm.
right? And I definitely, like, see that here. But things like, I don't know. Sometimes you want stuff to be at least a little more clearly defined. Like,
yes,
within the hallucination, everything that happens after the creepy choreography moment is a hallucination. Everything that
mm-hmm.
happens after that. And the creepy choreography moment is also a hallucination. In that time, we find out that Gemma was also a hallucination. But if we find
mm-hmm.
out in a hallucination that she was a hallucination, can we even trust that? And it asks the question, like, was Gemma real? I guess not, even though that confirmation came in the middle of a hallucination. But it also is like, was Morris real? Like, what was real, Which, again, I understand is, like, part of the point. That's not something that I usually have a problem with in movies. Like, I love Black Swan. I love the movie that Black Swan was heavily influenced by, called Perfect Blue.
Yes.
Love that movie. Also a movie that deals with, like, the trappings of fame and the trauma of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, for me, that's the movie that I would go toward for like, those themes and stuff, and the whole, like, what's real, what isn't kind of thing. But, the very well produced movie, very well performed movie. I really liked the cast and the performances.
I agree completely.
Just, a lot of product placement.
No, I think that that's a very fair critique. I am one of those people who tends to be annoyed by the ending that's like, it was all a dream. It was all a hallucination.
Yeah.
Some people seem to find that mind-blowing or revelatory, but it really only becomes successful if it recontextualizes the whole movie in a meaningful way.
Right, exactly. Otherwise, it feels a little bit like a cop-out.
It feels like a cop-out. It feels cheap. It did not recontextualize the whole movie for me because we already knew that she was hallucinating.
Right.
That's part and parcel with how the curse works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it was a big surprise or a big reveal to be like, oh, and by the way, that didn't happen.
Right.
And as you said, like the fuzziness of like, where does the hallucination start and stop? It would have been better if it were more defined, because it wasn't until the very end of the movie, like literally the very end, where Skye has killed herself and we see her mother looking on. I guess we are to assume that her mom was never injured in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess that's what really happened, which then made me think back, like you said, about half an hour into the movie to be like, just how far back does the hallucination go? And yeah, it was more obscuring than illuminating, which, yeah, feels like a cop-out when that is the payoff for being like, it was all a dream.
And that's such a great way to put it. More obscuring than illuminating is exactly it. It makes the whole movie in hindsight feel more muddled than I would prefer.
I completely agree with that. And what you were saying about how people are like, oh, this is such a good movie. Like, I did enjoy the movie, absolutely. But I wouldn't put myself in the camp of like, this is one of the best horror movies, you know. I hold The Ring as the gold standard for all of my horror movie interpretations. And I would rewatch The Ring 5 more times before watching this movie again. All that being said, I was going to say I don't feel like my time was wasted, but actually I do feel like maybe half an hour of my time was wasted. The movie was too long. It was too long.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, I think this was a great cast. I think the performances were great. This was an amazing vehicle for Naomi Scott. I'm pretty sure the only other things I had seen her in were Charlie's Angels and the Aladdin movie. Not the best vehicles to show off the breadth of her talent. So I was very pleasantly surprised by not only is she an amazing singer, but I thought her performance was very good. Not necessarily nuanced, but convincing.
For sure.
Having said that, though, I'm like, I can only see so many scenes of her looking on horrified, tearfully, snottily.
Thank you. Thank you. We remarked on that too. And, listen, I really this is the first thing I've ever seen her in. And I really, really liked her. And again, cast her in something where she is related to Sarah Michelle Gellar. Because
yeah,
that's
totally.
so insane. But, I'm seeing people be like, oh, this is the most memorable horror performance of like the last decade or something. And I'm like, okay, well, I wouldn't maybe quite go that far because it was a very like straightforward, for me at least, like character in the way that it was written, which is not to say that there wasn't any depth there, but you're right. There's a lot of the like panic stricken long looks of like reaction shots. It does get a little, which of course she was good at because she had time to practice them over and over again throughout the course of the movie.
Yes. And she was so well hydrated. I think that's
true.
Why she was able to be so teary and snotty all the time.
Exactly.
She had to replenish those fluids. But yes, by the last 20 or so minutes of the movie, it got to the point where I was like, okay, I get it. Trauma sucks.
Yeah.
Trauma begets more trauma, and trying to hide your trauma only causes more trauma. And so, yeah, it did get to the point where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm being hit over the head with the themes, with the imagery, with the scares. So the runtime could have been shaved, in my opinion.
And for me, I felt like the pacing, at least in the beginning, was a little slow and off. It took her until like halfway through the movie to even kind of figure out what was going on, really.
Yes.
Which for a sequel, I understand that you want it to be accessible to the audience, to an audience that might not have seen the first one. But your existing audience, which already knows what's happening, it took a little bit for us to like get there. I felt like the beginning of the movie could have been truncated a little.
Yes. And yeah, I do want to second your recommendation for Black Swan and Perfect Blue as movies that explore the pop star machine and what sort of psychological effects that can have. Those are both excellent movies. And I would, especially if you're looking for a horror movie in a similar vein, I think that Black Swan is a very good recommendation over this movie. Yeah.
It felt like there were a lot of inspirations for this one. Like, I agree with you. The first one seemed very inspired by The Ring and maybe like movies like It Follows and stuff.
Yes.
And the second one, it felt like it was inspired by like a ton of other different stuff, and I wish that had been reflected more in the theming of it. Like, I thought that the first movie, The Curse, is a metaphor for trauma and unresolved trauma and stuff. I thought that it was gonna pivot slightly in the second one, and The Curse was gonna be a metaphor for addiction, substance abuse, or fame or something. And I don't feel like, if that was what they were going for, I didn't feel like it was as clearly like defined.
I agree. I feel like you could say broad strokes, addiction is trauma, substance abuse is trauma, survivor's guilt is trauma.
True.
But like you said, it would be more interesting if it, instead of looking at the umbrella definition of everything that could be considered trauma, to drill down and be like, no, let's make this more specifically analogous with substance abuse. I agree. I feel like that would have been a more effective idea for the movie to explore.
Color-wise,
Yes.
red, I think the only times that I didn't speak up during the synopsis was she has some like red in her apartment. And maybe there's one other instance of it. But she stops wearing red pretty early. Oh, other than the costume during one of the rehearsals is red.
Yes.
I can't really figure out what I think red is supposed to symbolize, which is, like, again, it's another thing where it's like, I wish they had really, like, drilled down into that like they did in the first one, where I felt like all of the colors were so clear and consistent. But the red, it can't be fame, because in the first 5 minutes of the movie, the red sports car and the red couches, I thought it was going to be maybe something about like money or power, or maybe even like that's the substance abuse through line thing, because those guys were like drug dealers, but there was no red in the other drug dealer's apartment. Yeah, and the red just kind of like disappears partway through the movie. So maybe I missed it. Super likely. But I was kind of bummed that didn't really seem to go anywhere, because it was so clear in the first one, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I wasn't paying that close attention.
It's just so distracted by how thirsty we were for VOSS.
If only those VOSS water bottles were red.
Yeah, they should have been. I truly did find it legitimately distracting.
I agree. I also feel like I'm very attuned to being annoyed by product placement. So anytime it's so blatant, it's incredibly annoying.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of VOSS water bottles, shall we move on to the game portion?
Beautiful segue.
All right. Let's discuss / tally up our points. Our first Chekhov's gun, we both kind of had the same but different. You had Chekhov's back pain. Certainly it was a through line, and it motivated her to seek out Lewis, which then was obviously instrumental in passing on the curse.
Yeah, but I would say it didn't pay off in like a satisfying way that, it was more like, boy, this is hard to explain. How do you do this every episode?
It is hard to explain. Yes.
Yeah, it felt more like a narrative step than a
Yes.
setup payoff kind of a thing.
Yeah, this is something that's interesting about Chekhov's gun and why we have the point tallying / discussion section, which is that it is hard to land on an absolute definition of Chekhov's gun. And it does, I think, often come down to subtleties of like, well, how did the setup and payoff work versus was it just like laying the groundwork for the next scene and therefore it doesn't exactly function as a Chekhov's gun. I also think, not in this case, but in other cases, sometimes there's a plot element that's just so obviously setting the stage that it's not mysterious enough to be a Chekhov's gun.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, obviously that's not a Chekhov's gun because like, of course it's going to come back,
very true.
But anyway, so are you comfortable with subtracting points for this one?
Yeah.
I feel bad.
No, I'll take the hit. It was, I thought it was going to pay off in a more pivotal moment. So I think I deserve the deduction.
And then mine was Chekhov's lower back scar. So I did focus more specifically on the scars being something that would come back.
True.
Did not come back in the way that I envisioned. However, I did not guess that a monster meat puppet thing would birth itself from the scar.
And how could you have?
I feel like it did come back. It did have a setup. It did have a payoff.
Yeah, I'd say.
Okay, I'm going to give myself 2 points for identifying, but not the additional point for the payoff. And then and then both you and I have Chekhov's VOSS water bottles, which hilariously is a Chekhov's gun.
Unbelievable.
This is so funny. We both get points for that. I love it. I love that for us.
The most unlikely actual points.
We should really be thanking VOSS for our fake points here.
That's so true.
Chekhov's Katana is the next one. I was this close to guessing Chekhov's Katana as well. I feel like anytime there's a weapon
Yeah,
very prominent weapon, you have to assume it's going to come back.
Yeah,
right?
she even mentions it. Like after it's a very like close up shot of him like holding it up to her throat, and then she even is
and
like,
then she says, "What's with the katana?"
Yeah, I was like, oh, clearly. But I think I was thinking, I've seen this actor before. This is a character in the movie.
Yes.
I didn't connect him to being the same drug dealer from the beginning.
I didn't either. And in fact, I had to double check. I was like, how did Lewis get the curse? And I was like, was he the guy in the beginning? And in fact, he was.
Yeah. So, I made some assumptions that made me misfire a little bit.
Like I said, I almost guessed this. So I feel like your instincts were right. However, it's not come back. So we are doing -1 point for that.
Oof, what a hit.
I know. My next one did not pay off either. Chekhov's vomit, much to my chagrin, did not have any sort of payoff. Although I was tickled that Skye was Googling whether there's DNA in vomit.
That was a very funny detail. I loved all of those little funny moments. That was very fun.
Me too. -1 point for that for me. Next, we have Chekhov's butterfly costume, which was one of your guesses. Absolutely came back.
Kinda. I guess in a similar way to the scar, came back. Because I wasn't totally sure how I thought it was going to come back. It stood out to me when she was like, I'm never wearing that or something. Anybody that says, like, makes some sort of sweeping absolute statement in a movie, it's like, okay, well, that's going to be something.
Yes. Gilligan cut to her wearing the costume all the time.
Yeah.
No, I do feel like it definitely had that setup that you mentioned. The payoff came at a big culmination scene. And also, I think that the symbology of it being a butterfly is interesting as well, because butterflies really represent transformation, right? Going from the caterpillar to the cocoon. She kind of emerges from a cocoon or vagina cave, yes. If you will.
Please use its proper name.
Yes, excuse me. And last, we have the infamous, the ever popular, the beloved Chekhov's vagina cave.
Classic. If you set up a vagina cave in Act 1.
It has to go off in Act 3.
Again, I put it down as a joke. I didn't actually, I thought maybe because we were thinking that, something was going to happen at the end on stage, but, more than anything, it was a joke. So I was shocked. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yes. Bravo. I just love that the vagina cave came back. Yeah. It had a payoff. I love that. All right. I am going to tally up the points. This is where I make the robot noises. Beep, boop, boop, boop. All right. The scores have been tallied. We have myself with 4 points and Jen with 7 points.
Whoa.
Congratulations, Jen. You are our winner.
How did that happen?
Pew, pew, pew. It was the vagina cave.
Oh, isn't it always?
Isn't it always? Goes without saying. Well, I don't know how else to end the show except on vagina cave. So thank you so much, Jen, for joining me on the show. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
You are welcome back anytime.
I'd love to.
And in the meantime, where can our listeners find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Hey Jen Owens. I don't post much, but maybe I will. You're welcome to find me there.
Does the back catalog of One Person's Trash is Our Treasure live on somewhere? Can listeners listen to that?
I believe it does. I believe it is still on iTunes.
Awesome. I highly recommend that everyone check out Optiot. It's an amazing podcast.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Jen, and we'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to Chekhov's Whatever. Go to chekhovswhatever.substack.com to follow along with the podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave a positive review. You can also find video clips and full audio episodes on YouTube, so be sure to like and subscribe at Chekhov's Whatever. And finally, you can send email to chekhovswhateverpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's end this show with a bang.